Have you seen The Hidden? A mysterious alien parasite jumps from body to body, turning ordinary people into violent criminals. FBI agent Lloyd Gallagher teams up with LAPD detective Tom Beck to track the creature across the city. As the alien leaves a trail of chaos, Beck begins to uncover secrets about Gallagher and the true nature of the threat. The Hidden, though, is 97 minutes long, including credits, which accounts for about 5 of those. That's the perfect length of a movie that wants to tell their story. Don't get bogged down in details, you just elaborate just enough to make the story believable, and this movie did that for the most part. What it didn't do well was the ending, but I'll cover more of that in my review at the end of the video, which you can just jump to using the chapters, because I need to talk a little bit about the director, writer, cast, and finally, the plot, which will be very vague. Also, in case I don't mention it, this movie has a lot of did that influence that vibes. This movie feels like the original version of what Men in Black was, or was meant to be before they made it into a comedy, which I found out today was actually a comic. Didn't know that. Or did the movie influence Resident Alien or the Lou Diamond Phillips, the first Power movie? You feel it throughout the movie. But outside that, stick around or see you at the review. Either way, spoilers. Jack Shoulder. Jack Shoulder's director career began all the way back in 1973 during his college days of studying English literature. He made a number of short films, one of them being The Garden Party in 1973, based on the short story by Catherine Mansfield. That movie was the ultimate catalyst that led to Jack Shoulder devoting himself to becoming a director. After graduating, he moved to New York and eventually, through a little luck through a mutual friend, he met the founder of New Line Cinema, Robert Shaye. This meeting would eventually lead to him to becoming an editor for trailers, foreign films, title sequences, on a regular basis for New Line. After release and success of Friday the 13th, New Line was looking for their own horror movie. That is when Shoulder pitched what would eventually be his cult classic, Alone in the Dark. This movie was not a box office success. It made a little bit of money, but it showed Shaye that Shoulder had the makings of being a director, or at least a low-budget horror movie director, which was what New Line was, or trying to be good at that time. Within a few years, Shaye came back and wanted Shoulder to direct the sequel to Nightmare on Elm Street 2. Now, of course, this is downplaying the fact that Wes Craven wanted to do the sequel, but hated many things that was in the script, like the pool party scene. And also, Shoulder originally didn't want to do another horror movie, but took the chance in order to put himself on the map. The movie was a wild success at the box office. Maybe not as good as the first or the third, financially or review-wise, but a great success either way. And this is one of the few movies that the director, he didn't understand the subcontext of what was written, but directed everything that was in the script and has now become a cultural phenomenon for the LGBTQ audience over the past couple of decades, with people realizing what the writer was implying with the work. Afterwards, Shoulder would go on to do this movie, The Hidden. Right out the gate, Shoulder had proved himself to be a competent director with real talent for horror and fast action. And not only that, he also created 3 cult classics. But then we enter the Dark Age, or more commonly called, the rest of Shoulder's career. After the middling success of The Hidden, it was a financial success. It made back twice its money, but it didn't catch on. Shoulder would go on to direct an episode of the TV series Vietnam War Story for HBO in 1988. That is when he returned to movies and directed the box office bomb Renegades, whose combined talent of Lou Diamond Phillips and Kiefer Sutherland couldn't save the film. This is also the beginning of what was always wrong with Shoulder's career. Shoulder didn't like doing the same thing twice, and he didn't like sticking with what he was good at. The car chase scene in Renegades had to be bigger, had to be different and new, and the movie still bombed. But the only thing that this movie is famous for is that car chase. His career would take a hit, and he would spend the next decade doing TV shows and TV movies before returning back to movies, but not cinema, with his direct-to-video release of Wishmaster 2 his career would eventually peter out and he would retire. The man that began his career with three cult classics would eventually whimper into the annals of time. Jim Coof, or Bob Hunt. Not a lot is said about Jim Coof's personal life, or at least not on his wiki. He began his career with his 1981 The Boogans, a financial success but a critically panned movie, being labeled incoherent, one star, so so. In fact, many of his movies in the beginning of his career were described this way, from Wacko, Pink Motel, Up the Creek, Miracles, all the way to his 1987 Edgar Award for Best Motion Picture for The Stakeout. How does that happen? In fact, in 1987 was his big turnaround for that decade, mainly because afterwards he would go back into the doghouse for nearly a decade longer before giving us one of the best buddy cop movies of the 90s, Rush Hour. Finally, he understood what people wanted to see. Then he gave us Snow Dogs. Okay, maybe not completely understood, but then he followed that up within 2 years with National Treasure and Taxi. Afterwards, and during, Coof would still write movies, but he began to get more and more invested in TV and would go on to co-create Grimm, a hugely popular, successful TV show about a police officer who discovers he's a Grimm and must now protect mankind and mythological kind from what goes bump in the night. Hey, that sounds a little familiar. Now, in order to keep this light, I will not be telling you everything about the cast of this movie, and I will be talking about who I consider to be the 5 prime characters of this movie based on how much they're in it, and I'll mainly just be talking about their character in the movie because some of these guys have a long and extensive career. Kyle MacLachlan brings that perfect, polite, but unsettling energy to Lloyd Gallagher, the kind of performance only he can do. By the time he made The Hidden, he had already become David Lynch's go-to leading man. He starred in movies like Paul Atreides in Dune, Jeffrey Beaumont in Blue Velvet. A few years later, he would become iconic as Agent Dale Cooper in Twin Peaks, winning a Golden Globe and earning multiple Emmy nominations. MacLachlan has always had a knack for playing characters who seem just a little out of step with the world around them, whether it's in Twin Peaks, Portlandia, or even his recent role in Fallout. That slightly alien quality, charming, calm, and quietly strange, is exactly what makes his performance here work. Gallagher feels human, but not quite human, and MacLachlan sells that with every look and line. He's also the same guy I keep thinking was in Inspector Gadget as Dr. Claw. Michael Nouri as Tom Beck. Michael Nouri plays Detective Tom Beck, the no-nonsense LAPD cop who suddenly finds himself partnered with the strangest FBI agent he's ever met. Nouri brings a grounded, straight-edge energy to the role. He's the guy trying to keep his feet on the ground while the movie keeps getting weirder around him. That dynamic is what makes his chemistry with Kyle MacLachlan work so well. Also, neither one of them actually wanted to do this movie without the other being in it. Outside of The Hidden, Nouri has had a long and steady career across film, television, and stage. He's known for starring in Flashdance and major TV shows on The OC, Damages, All My Children, and Yellowstone. He's also a veteran stage actor appearing in Broadway, off-Broadway productions, including the original Victor Victoria. Over the years, he's earned nominations for both Saturn Award, Daytime Emmys, and he brings that same dependable presence here. The kind of actor who makes a movie feel anchored even when aliens start body hopping around him. Claudia Christian as Brenda Lee Burren. Claudia Christian shows up as Brenda Lee Van Buren, and even though she's only in the movie for a short stretch, she makes it count. If she looks familiar, it's probably because she went on to play Commander Susan Ivanova on Babylon 5, a role she's returned to in pretty much every piece of Babylon 5 related media that exists. She's one of those actors who can shift from charming to intimidating in a heartbeat, which is exactly what this movie needs from her. Outside of sci-fi, she's had a long and varied career, including playing Captain Maynard on Fox's 911, which you don't need to watch, trust me, and voicing Lieutenant Helga Sinclair in Disney's Atlantis: The Lost Empire. Ed Ross as Cliff Willis, Detective Cliff Willis, Beck's solid straight shooting partner, the kind of cop who looks like he's seen everything right up until the movie proves him wrong. O. Ross is one of those great you've seen him before character actors. His career is packed with memorable tough guy roles like Itchian Dick Tracy, the ruthless Georgian mobster Victor Rostavili in Red Heat, Colonel Perry in Universal Soldier, and Lieutenant Touchdown in Full Metal Jacket. He also popped up in shows like 6 Feet Under and Shark because, of course, he's everywhere. He brings that same intimidating, no-nonsense presence to the hidden, which makes the twist involving his character land harder. Even if by the end it was a little predictable. William Boyett as Jonathan Miller. William Boyett plays Jonathan Miller, the quiet, ordinary man who becomes one of the aliens' earlier hosts. And he's perfect casting for it. Boyett was an American character actor best known for playing cops, sheriffs, security guards, and every other form of law enforcement you can imagine from 1950s through the 1990s. If there was a police procedural on TV, odds are he showed up in it. That's what makes his role here so effective. Boyett had the face of a trustworthy authority figure leading up to this film, which makes it all more unsettling when he suddenly transforms into the violent sociopath that you never really seen him play. He doesn't have many lines, but he sells the transformation with pure physical presence. And it sets the tone for how dangerous this alien really is. Also, what's interesting is how different his version of the alien feels compared to Claudia Christian. Her portrayal is cold and predatorial. It's slick. It's almost reptilian. Boyett's version is messier, more human in a gross way, especially with his sexual desires. They're playing the same creature, but their interpretations give it very different flavors of danger. And here's the plot. It's going to be very vague, though. Los Angeles is suddenly dealing with a wave of violent crimes committed by people who have absolutely no criminal history. One day, they're normal citizens. The next, they're robbing banks, stealing Ferraris, and mowing down anyone in their way. Detective Tom Beck is assigned to the case and is quickly paired with out-of-state FBI agent Lloyd Gallagher, a quiet, strange man who clearly knows more than he's letting on. Beck believes each killer is a burst of insanity with no real connections or motives, but Gallagher, though, believes they are all connected and becomes lasered focused on catching the person or thing responsible. It doesn't take long for Beck to realize something is seriously wrong. Every time they corner the suspect, the killer suddenly shows up in a completely different body. Gallagher finally reveals the truth. They're not chasing a criminal. They're chasing an alien parasite that jumps from host to host, leaving a trail of bodies behind it. From there, the movie becomes a race to stop the creature, all the while the alien keeps upgrading hosts, from criminals, cops, to someone with real power. As the chase intensifies, Gallagher finally begins to open up about who he really is, and his past with this thing slowly comes into focus. He's not just an FBI agent, he's something else entirely, and he's been hunting this creature for a long time. The final act takes a big swing, follows the same procedural. The good guys win. I won't spoil the exact mechanics, but the movie suddenly shifts into a more emotional, almost sentimental direction. It's bold to a degree, it's unexpected, and honestly, it's predictable the moment that Beck gets shot. Sorry, spoiler. Depending on who you ask, the ending adds either heart or completely derails what's been a tight, fast, gritty sci-fi thriller. For me, it sucked the wind right out of the sails, and what was shaping up to be a 9 out of 10 movie dropped to a 7. Now, on to the review. Before I jump into this, yes, this section deals with the plot, so spoilers, you're already here, so I assume you've seen this. I feel like I shouldn't have to say that, though, for a movie that came out about 40 years ago. But here we are. And yes, I brought up the age of the movie on purpose just to hit you with the realization that this movie is 40 years old. Star Wars is about to be 50. Anyways, this is a movie that is 9 out of 10, fun ride, fast action, and great acting. And the story that's almost there. Now, we could spend 10 minutes I don't think an hour getting nitty picky, talking about where this had little screw ups, like the beginning of the movie, which did get a laugh out of me. When Detective Beck shows true machismo by staying in the pathway of the car to shoot a shotgun. And the movie didn't even reward this moment by having his final shot be the decisive factor that stopped the car. The car was already going to stop. He just endangered himself. And then this was followed up by the moment that made me really laugh, which is when our first alien hopping host climbs out of the car, no weapon, smiles, and gets lit up like the 4th of July, even with the car exploding. It was perfection. And another moment, if we're, really combing for things that the movie had wrong, is when Claudia Christian's Brenda is getting shot in the arm over and over. I don't know how someone could pull off 7 to 8 shots in the arm over and over, but, Beck and Gallagher are true marksmen. But no, all joking aside, the only downside to the movie is the ending. Those little bits that I mentioned before are what brings the movie down from a 9 out of 10. But the ending is what drops it to a 7, which is the biggest issue for the movie. I think you could still do the same ending, but your movie probably needs another 30 minutes. So much happens within the last 15 or so minutes that nothing was built up or had satisfactory payoff. Beck being shot and about to die was predictable and excusable for a great ending. The only issue, or the bigger issue, is that our alien hopping parasite chooses a politician as his next host, a politician that wanted to run for president. That right there is either sequel bait or a sign that our movie needs another 30 minutes. But I don't know how to rewrite the ending without moving away from the political angle or having a time leap forward with another 30 minutes added, or a sequel. I kind of like how Gallagher was killed in the backstory, so I would have brought that forward and, completely rewrote or tossed away his backstory. I like the idea of Gallagher and Beck chasing the alien into the woods of Oregon or California. Or I would add another 30 minutes with Beck on life support. Each day is touch and go. All the while, Gallagher is becoming more and more human, dealing with his newfound emotions that lead him to setting up an ambush on a senator's political route, who the alien is finding that he has a lot of power and doesn't really need to kill anyone to get what he wants, especially since there's plenty of people out there who's willing to give him whatever he wants in order to win his support. Or the final move, just make a sequel. Have the movie end with Gallagher believing he killed the creature, and Beck is wounded, Beck dies, Gallagher saves him. Mainly saves the life that Beck built with his wife and daughter, which is what was taken from Gallagher. And the creature is revealed to be alive in a senator, and we have our big sequel bait. But in all honesty, I don't know what to do. The ending is unsatisfactory, not because so much that Beck was bound to die and Gallagher would inhabit him, but that everything happened in such quick succession that the ending didn't make a ton of sense. Little added details could have sold the ending a little better, not changing having Beck live or Gallagher inhabiting him, but maybe having Gallagher handcuffed to his bed, that he just, breaks his thumb without caring and creeps through the hospital to Beck's room and, change the setting to nighttime for more ambiance and include Beck struggling to breathe. And then we have our save Beck moment. Just adding that, padding a little more minute or two. I mean, I'm not talking about 15 more minutes even, but just adding that minute or two, showing a little bit more world realism, saves so much of the story. Like, if you think about it a little too long, you begin to make up new questions like, why wasn't Gallagher handcuffed? He just killed a senator. Or why didn't he wake up in a room surrounded by men in black? Because he just killed an alien and he himself just took, 40 shots to the body and lived. It was just a lot of missed opportunities. Also, on a final note, I think it's a little funny thinking about it now. Gallagher in this scene is dead on the floor, and Gallagher Beck is beckoning his daughter to come hold his hand while his wife is crying and holding him. You know, it's a really weird moment when you think about it, because there's a dead guy right next to the bed. Just, really weird. Anyway, that's my review. 7 out of 10. This movie was a fun watch, definitely putting it on my rewatch list. But outside of that, you guys have a good one.